Hi everyone. Today we are going to look at sections 3.1 and 3.2 in our Hawks College Algebra textbook and look at some graphing on the coordinate plane. All right, so first thing we're going to do is, in order to graph on the coordinate plane, we have to review and look at our coordinate plane. If you recall, the coordinate plane is made up of two axes, or I like to think of them as two number lines, one going vertical, one going horizontal. Your vertical number line is your x-axis, your horizontal number line is your y-axis. It creates four quadrants, so we have quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and then quadrant 4. They do go counterclockwise, and they're always labeled with Roman numerals. In the center is the origin, which is 0, 0. We always start at the center when we go to graph a point. We graph ordered pairs on the coordinate plane. So for instance, if I wanted to graph something like -3, 4, okay, your x value is always the first value in your ordered pair, and your y value is always the second value. You always graph them in the order x first, then y. So I would start at 0, 0, my origin here, go out to -3, so -1, -2, -3, and then from there, because it's +4, go up 1, 2, 3, 4, and right there, this will be my point, and it would be -3, 4, and you only need the point right here. I just made the dots on the other ones when I was counting, but you don't need those. And let's see here. I think that is it for the coordinate plane. The other thing, just a reminder, on your x-axis, after the origin to the left, you have your negative numbers. On the y-axis below 0, you have your negative numbers. And then to the right on the x-axis and above 0, you have your positive values. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just review how to graph a line. So we have an equation here, 2x minus 5y equals 10 in standard form. And we'll talk more about standard form again later in 3.2. But there's two ways you can graph a line. The first way is you can put it into slope-intercept form and graph it using the slope and the y-intercept, which I think is the way that most people tend to do it, or you can just plot some ordered pairs, find a couple ordered pairs for the line and plot those. So the first way we'll take a look is we will take our 2x minus 5y equals 10, and I'm going to solve it for y. So I'm going to put it in slope-intercept form. The first thing I'm going to do is subtract my 2x from both sides. So now I have negative 5y equals negative 2x plus 10. And then we'll divide everything by negative 5. So we get y equals 2/5 x, because the two negatives make it positive, minus 10 divided by 5 is 2. All right, so remember, slope-intercept form is mx plus b, and that means that the slope for our equation is 2/5, and our y-intercept is b, so it is -2. So to graph it using slope-intercept form, I'm going to go to my y-intercept first, because that's a point that I know. Remember, the ordered pair for your y-intercept would be 0, -2. So we will go down to -2 on the y-axis, and I'll plot that point right there. And then my slope, it's a positive 2/5. Remember, slope is the same as rise over run. So I'm going to start, my rise is 2. I'm going to rise up 2, and I'll put it in red just so you can see it. So I'm going to go up 2, so 1, 2. And then I'm going to run. You always run to the right. If it's like a negative slope, you would rise down or go down instead of up. But I'm going to run to the right. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's where my next point would be. You only need 2 points to plot a line, but I like to do a third just to make it a little easier. So I'm going to do the same thing. From there, I'm going to go up 2. So up 1, 2, and then run over 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my last point that I'm going to plot is going to be right here. And now I will draw my line. All right, should be a lot straighter than that. I'm not very good drawing straight lines on here clearly. But that's how you would plot it using your slope intercept. And now we're going to look at how to plot it just by getting some points on the graph. Now, if you wanted to graph it by just finding some points, what you would do is find your, draw a T-chart. So it looks like a T, that's why it's called a T-chart. Put your X and your Y. And then you simply pick an X or a Y value. Pick one or the other. So I'm going to make X equal to 1. I just picked it out of thin air. And then I'll plug it into my equation. So I'll do 2 times 1 minus 5y equals 10. And so that's 2 minus 5y equals 10. Now I'm going to solve for y. So I would subtract 2 from both sides. So we get negative 5y equals 8. Divide by negative 5. So y equals negative 8/5. Now, you're probably like, well, that's really kind of hard. And it is. To graph, you would kind of have to estimate that. I would turn it into a mixed number in this case. It's the one time when I think mixed numbers are pretty good to use. And you need 2 points to graph a line. I always say try to get 3 for insurance purposes. But we'll do some more graphing by ordered pairs shortly. So I'm going to stop for this slide and we'll move on to the next one. All right. The next thing we're going to talk about are the distance and the midpoint formulas. Again, this should be a review. We're going to review it. I would encourage you guys when you're taking a quiz, this is a formula that you'll be allowed to have. So I would write it down like on an index card or note card. The midpoint and the distance formula are ones you can use. If we're in school, I will have a formula sheet for you, but if you're at home, you can put it on an index card. So you don't have to memorize the formulas, you just have to know how to use them. So the distance formula, you need 2 ordered pairs, so you can find the distance between those 2 points on any line. And our distance formula is the square root of x2, x sub 2, it's a subscript, minus x sub 1 squared, plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1 squared. And we're going to practice that in just a second. We're going to take a look at a couple of those. We'll try one now. If I give you the ordered pair, and again, I'm just going to make this up, but let's see. My first ordered pair, I'm going to make it negative 6, 5. My second ordered pair, 3, negative 2. All right, it doesn't matter which one you label x1 and y1 as long as the 1s are together and the 2s are together. Okay, so if I put it into my distance formula, I'm going to have, so it would be 3 minus negative 6 squared plus, and then my y's, it would be negative 2 minus 5 squared. So that is going to give me the square root of 3 minus negative 6 plus a positive will give me 9 squared plus negative 2 minus 5, put it plus a negative, will give me negative 7 squared. And that's going to equal the square root of 81 plus 49. So, and I'm going to move up here. Then I'm going to have the square root of, let's see, 130 if I did my math correct. And then from there, either you can use a calculator if they ask for an approximate distance if it's not a perfect square, or you could break it down. 130 let's see here. 9 won't go into it. Does 16 go into it? No. 9 doesn't go into it. 16, 25 don't go into it. I actually think it is done. So our answer, if we leave it in exact form, would just be the square root of 130. It can't be simplified. The next formula we're going to look at, which I mentioned briefly earlier, is our midpoint formula. And that is where you can find the midpoint, or the point that is halfway between the 2 points. And the formula to do that, you would take the two x values, add them together, and divide by 2. And then the two y values, divide it together and divide by 2. And that will give you your ordered pair, which is your midpoint. So, for instance, if I had an ordered pair of, let's see here. Let's do, adjust that, okay. Let's do 7, -12, and 5, -6. All right, we're going to find the midpoint on that. So we are going to, again, doesn't matter what you call 1s or 2s, just as long as they're the same for x's and y's. So we will start first. We are going to add 7 plus 5, divide by 2. That'll be my x value. And then -12 plus -6 and divide by 2. That will be my y value. 7 plus 5 is 12. 12 divided by 2 is going to give me 6 for my x value. And then -12 plus -6 is going to give me -18 divided by 2. So my answer would be -9. So my midpoint between 7 and -12 and 5 and -6 would be 6 and -9. All right, so again, here we're just going to practice finding the distance and the midpoint between 2 points. So our 2 points are 5, 1 and -1, 3. So again, I'll make this x1, y1, x2, y2. And our distance formula, if you recall, is d is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And that means that we are going to do -1 minus 5 squared plus 3 minus 1 squared, which again will give me plus -6 squared plus 2 squared, which gives me 36, plus 4, which gives me the square root of 40, which we know we can break down to the square root of 4 times the square root of 10, so it equals 2 square root 10. And then our midpoint, again, we can use our two ordered pairs that we labeled. So I'm going to add my x values together, so it'll be 5 plus -1 divided by 2, and 3 plus 1 divided by 2. So I'm going to end up with 4 divided by 2, and actually 4 divided by 2. So my midpoint is going to be the ordered pair of 2, 2. And that is it for 3-1. Now we're going to move on to 3-2. In 3-2, we're just going to talk about linear equations in two variables. So really, again, another review of linear equations. Nothing too hard for today. All right, and the first thing I just want to remind you guys of is a linear equation. We've talked about slope-intercept form, and we've also talked about standard form. Here, they are just reviewing, again, what standard form is. And standard form is when x and y are on one side, and it's ax plus by equals c. And that is considered standard form. A, B, and C represent the numbers. They're constants. But A and B both can't be 0 because if they are, then you don't have an X or a Y. All right, so we're going to graph the two equations using our X and our Y intercepts. So just as a reminder, your intercepts are where the line will touch either the X or the Y axis. So we're going to start with A and graph that. And again, because I'm going to do my X and Y intercepts, I'm going to make a T-chart. So I'm going to have my X and my Y. So remember, for your Y intercept, the ordered pair is 0 with a number. And your X-intercept would be a number for X and a 0 for Y. So we're going to put those on our T-chart. I'm going to put a 0 in for X to start with. And let's see here. If I do 3 times 0 minus 4y equals 12. 3 times 0 is 0, so I'm left with negative 4y equals 12. I'll divide by negative 4. So y equals 3. My y-intercept is 3. And it's going to be a negative 3 because one positive, one negative. Okay, and then for my x-intercept, let me see if I can erase a little bit there. Okay, so for my x-intercept, we're going to plug in a 0 for y. And then so I end up with 3x equals 12, divide by 3, and x will be 4. So my y-intercept is 4, 0, and my x-intercept, or no, my x-intercept is 4, 0, my y-intercept is 0, negative 3. So when I graph it using those points, I'm going to plot those 2 points. So 0, negative 3 would be right here. And then 4, 0 would be right here. And again, sometimes it's good to do a third point for insurance purposes, and you could pick the number you want because you've already done your intercepts. But on Hawks, when they ask you, and they say use intercepts, if you don't, they will mark it wrong if you don't use the intercepts. All right, so that's it for the first one. We're going to take a look at the second one next. All right, so let's graph B. And the first thing you want to do here is put it into standard form. So really, we need to distribute our negative sign to my parentheses. So we end up with 4x minus 3. Then 2 negatives make that plus x, plus 2y equals 7. Combine our like terms. So 4x plus x would give me 5x minus 3 plus 2y equals 7. And then we do want to move, we just want x and y on the side, not on the left side, not the 3. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. And that is going to give me 5x plus 2y equals 10. And now I am going to find my x-intercepts. So again, I'm going to make my T-chart. And I'll put a 0 in for x to find the y-intercept, a 0 in for y to find the x-intercept. If we start with a 0 in for x, it would be 5 times 0 plus 2y equals 10. 5 times 0 is 0, so we have 2y equals 10. Divide by 2, and y would be 5. So my y-intercept is 0, 5, or 5. And then my x-intercept, I'm going to do 5x plus 2 times 0 equals 10. And that is going to equal 5x is going to be equal to 10. Divide by 5, and x will equal 2. So my ordered pair there would be 2, 0. So now I have 0, 5, which is on the y-axis, and 2, 0, which is on my x-axis right here. So we'll draw our line. And again, sorry, it's not perfectly straight, but there is our ordered pair graphed, or our line graphed, with our 2 x and y intercepts. All right, now we are going to work on graphing the following 3 equations. So the first thing you're going to do, again, for the first one for A, is to simplify the equation by distributing your 2 and combining like terms. So when I do that, it's going to give me 3x plus 2x plus 14 minus 2y equals 5x. And then we are going to combine like terms. I'll do that down here. So I'm going to end up with 5x plus 14 minus 2y equals 5x. And again, to graph it, you can put it in slope-intercept form or standard form. Let's go ahead and put it in standard form. Now you notice when I do that, I'm going to subtract 5x from both sides. And then I'm going to go ahead and subtract 14 from both sides to put it on the other side. So now I'm going to end up with negative 2y equals negative 14, because my 5x's will cancel on both sides, and then my 14 cancels here. So now I'm going to solve my equation for y, and I'm going to get y is equal to 7. Now, if you recall, when you have a special equation like this, if you have just y equals 7, remember, it's going to be either a horizontal or a vertical line when you graph it. If I draw my t-chart, which I'll do up here, and y is 7, that means for every ordered pair that I create, y is going to be 7. X, it's really like 0 times x because it's not in there. So I can make it whatever I want, 1, 2, or 3. So here is my y equals 7, and when I graph it, if I graph my ordered pairs, and I put an extra one in there, it will form a horizontal line crossing over the y-axis. And anywhere that I look on this line, y will always be 7. X can be anything, but y will always be 7. Now, if we take a look at B, again, let's solve it for x. So to do that, we're just going to divide by 5. And now I have x equals 0. When x equals 0 here, your graph is actually going to be, x will always be 0. So if I make my t-chart, x is always 0. That means y, I can make it anything I want. But what it's going to end up being, if x equals 0, you're going to have a vertical line, a vertical line. Yep, get my verticals and horizontals mixed up. It's going to be a vertical line, and it's going to be the y-axis, because wherever x is 0, y can be any number, but it's going to be your y-axis for that. And then for our last one, again, it only has an x value in it, no y, so it's going to end up being a vertical or a horizontal line. So let's solve it by, first we'll add 2 to both sides. So now I have 2x equals 5. Divide by 2. So we get x equals 5 halves, or in this case, this is the one time where I think, a mixed number is kind of helpful to help us. 2 goes into 5 2 whole times with 1 left over. So x is equal to 2.5. So again, if I were to make a t-chart, x would always be 2.5 or 2.5. You can make y anything you want because it's like y equals 0. Or it's y times 0, and when it's missing. So if we go to 2.5, it's right here on my x-axis, and then I'll add in another point or 2, and then go ahead and draw my line again. It should be halfway through there and not looking as crooked as that. I know you guys can do better than I can, but that would be our equation. It is another vertical line. We're going to talk about the slopes of vertical, horizontal lines, and any other line in 3.3, our next section, which we will worry about next week. So hopefully this was a good lesson, and I will talk to you guys later.